It was an ordinary spring morning in New York City. The sky above Central Park was painted in soft shades of grey-blue, and the wind carried with it the fresh scent of dew and blooming dogwoods. Runners passed by in their neon gear, parents pushed strollers along winding paths, and the rhythm of city life throbbed just beyond the trees. Among the early risers was Daniel Mercer, a 34-year-old high school teacher with a calm demeanor and a quiet love for solitude. He had walked this same route for years, always entering through the 72nd Street entrance, always taking the same loop around the reservoir. That day, April 14, 2009, was no different, until it was. Daniel passed by the usual landmarks, the bronze statue of Alexander Hamilton, the flower beds near Strawberry Fields, the old stone bench under the twisted elm tree. He wore a navy blue windbreaker, beige slacks, and a worn Yankees cap he had owned since college. He carried a messenger bag with a notebook, a bottle of water, and a copy of the Histories by Herodotus. One witness remembered him sitting on the bench, quietly reading, not looking at his phone or talking to anyone. Just there, present, at peace. By noon, Daniel Mercer was gone. He didn't come home. He didn't call his sister Claire, who he usually texted by evening. His co-workers hadn't seen him at school. He didn't answer his phone. At first, Claire thought maybe he had stayed longer in the park, maybe taken a detour or met someone spontaneously. But as the hours passed and the sun dipped behind the skyline, unease turned to dread. The NYPD was notified the following morning. Search teams were dispatched across Central Park. Police dogs were brought in, helicopters hovered. They combed every path, every wooded nook, every tunnel, every lake. Nothing. No signs of a struggle. No wallet or bag. No shoes left by the water. No body. Daniel Mercer had vanished without a trace in one of the most populated cities in the world. If you want more unbelievable real-life mysteries, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Some tales hide in plain sight. Others disappear before our eyes. The investigation was swift at first. Flyers appeared on lampposts. His photo, light brown hair, kind hazel eyes, thin frame, was shown on local news stations. Anyone with information was urged to call. But there was little to report. Witnesses confirmed seeing him walking near the reservoir around 9:45 a.m. One jogger recalled seeing him sitting on that bench under the elm tree, reading a book. No one recalled seeing him leave. Security footage near the park's perimeter didn't capture him exiting. His phone signal was last detected at 10:02 a.m., pinging off a cell tower in the park's center. Then silence. In a city known for its noise, its movement, and its constant surveillance, Daniel's disappearance was eerie in its stillness. Claire refused to believe her brother had just walked away from his life. They were close, closer than most siblings. They had lost their parents young, leaned on each other for years. Daniel was steady, predictable, not prone to recklessness or sudden whims. As days turned to weeks and weeks into months, the trail went cold. The police filed their reports, the media moved on. But Claire didn't. She visited the park every week, sat on the same bench, walked the same loop, talked to strangers who might have seen something, anything, but the answer never came. 15 years passed, until one morning in late March 2024, a janitor clearing benches before sunrise found something lodged between the slats of wood and rusted iron. A cap. Dusty, faded, but unmistakably real. It was navy blue, with a frayed Yankees logo on the front. Claire was called. DNA testing confirmed what she already knew the moment she saw it. The cap was Daniel's. And it had been found on the very bench where he was last seen, 15 years to the week after he vanished. Why now? Why here? Why in perfect condition, as if time had skipped a beat? No one had an answer. But for Claire Mercer, it was no longer just about closure. It was about finding out what happened on that quiet April morning and what still might be hiding in the shadows of Central Park. Daniel Mercer had always been a quiet force, a man of quiet rituals, deep thought, and private passions. Born in 1975 in Queens, New York, he had grown up in a small apartment above a bakery, the scent of rising dough forever linked to his childhood. His parents, William and Irene Mercer, were ordinary people, his father a city bus driver, his mother a nurse. Tragedy struck early. At just 12 years old, Daniel lost them both in a car crash one rainy November evening. From that moment on, he was raised by his older sister, Claire, who was 20 at the time and barely holding her own life together. Their bond was forged in grief and responsibility. Claire gave up her dreams of moving to California to care for her younger brother. Daniel, in turn, became fiercely devoted to her, never straying far from her orbit. She nurtured his love for books and ideas, feeding him stories of distant places, ancient civilizations, unsolved mysteries. By high school, Daniel had already earned a reputation as a brilliant if introverted student, someone more comfortable in a library than at a party. He studied history at Columbia University, graduated with honors, and took a teaching job at a public high school in Manhattan. There, he became something of an enigma to his students. He dressed plainly, spoke with precision, and seemed to know everything about everything, but rarely shared anything personal. His classroom was a sanctuary of maps, old books, and curiosity. Students remembered him not for charisma, but for his unshakable calm and the intensity with which he believed history mattered. Daniel wasn't lonely. He simply preferred solitude. He had a small circle of friends, never married, didn't date often. Most of his free time was spent walking the city, reading or writing in his leather-bound journals. He had dozens of them, filled with notes about forgotten wars, obscure rulers, abandoned buildings, and strange coincidences in history. Some pages were maps he'd redrawn, others sketches of old monuments or tunnels. He was especially fascinated with the idea of places that hid things in plain sight, cities layered upon cities, doors behind walls, civilizations beneath our feet. To most, Daniel's habits were harmless quirks. To Claire, they were his way of coping. He had always been a man searching for something, perhaps not a thing, but a feeling, a sense of belonging, or purpose, or order. The past to him made more sense than the present. Its patterns could be studied, its truths preserved. But in the months leading up to his disappearance, there had been small shifts. Claire noticed them first. He had become more distracted, more tired. He'd mention odd dreams he couldn't remember upon waking. He started walking earlier in the mornings, sometimes before sunrise, and he spoke less often of history and more often of something he felt close to uncovering. When Claire pressed him, he'd smile gently and say, "It's probably nothing." Just a strange idea. She didn't pry. They respected each other's space, but part of her wondered if the weight of the past, their past, was becoming too much. One day, a week before he vanished, she found him sitting on the steps of her apartment building, staring at the sky. He looked lost in thought. When she asked what was wrong, he said, "Do you ever feel like this city is holding its breath?" She laughed, thinking he was being poetic, but he didn't laugh back. In his final journal entry, dated April 13th, 2009, Daniel wrote a single sentence, "I think I found it." He didn't say what it was. There were no diagrams, no coordinates, no sketches, just that line. Claire didn't understand it then. She's still not sure she does, but she believes now more than ever that those words were not about history, but about something real, something that had changed him. He was not the type to walk away. He was the type to walk towards something, especially if it meant uncovering a truth no one else had seen. And perhaps that was the most haunting thing of all, the feeling that Daniel Mercer hadn't disappeared at random, but had gone somewhere on purpose. The morning Daniel Mercer vanished, Claire's phone remained silent. It wasn't entirely unusual. He often kept to himself during the day. But by evening her instincts stirred. He hadn't responded to her usual midday text. At first she thought nothing of it. Maybe he was caught up with grading papers or distracted in a bookstore. But as the hours passed, something shifted. Daniel was many things, but unreliable wasn't one of them. By 9 p.m. she called his cell. No answer. She left a voicemail, then another. Still nothing. She called his school colleague, Mr. Pike, to check if Daniel had shown up. "He wasn't here today," Pike said. "We just assumed he took a personal day." That wasn't like him. By midnight, Claire was pacing. She called hospitals, checked with neighbors. No one had seen him. His apartment door was locked, blinds drawn, lights off. She knocked again and again. Nothing. When she reported him missing the next morning, she half expected to find out he'd reappeared, apologetic and embarrassed. But the silence only deepened. Detective Lena Caldwell was assigned to the case. She was seasoned, direct, and not one for embellishment. She interviewed Claire thoroughly, then began a citywide check for activity, ATM transactions, phone records, public transport footage. "We'll find him," she said. "Most disappearances resolve in 72 hours. But this one didn't. Daniel's last known location was quickly established, Central Park, near the 72nd Street entrance. That morning, a jogger had seen a man matching his description sitting on a bench reading. A dog walker confirmed the sighting. A third witness, a hot dog vendor nearby, remembered him because Daniel had nodded politely when declining a snack. All accounts placed him in the same spot between 9:30 and 10 a.m. Then, nothing. Detective Caldwell requested surveillance footage from the park's edges. Cameras near exits showed many faces that day, but Daniel's never appeared. His phone pinged once at 10:02 a.m. near the park's center, then shut off completely. Not lost signal, shut off. That fact alone bothered Caldwell. Phones die. They don't vanish unless someone turns them off. Search teams were dispatched. Officers in neon vests spread out across the 843-acre expanse. Canine units sniffed for his scent. Helicopters hovered low. They dragged the ponds, scanned the woods, searched the tunnels and bridges. Claire was there for every sweep. She handed out flyers, spoke with strangers, stayed long after nightfall. But the park, vast and lush, offered no clues. No signs of a struggle, no discarded items, not a single trace of Daniel. His apartment remained untouched. Wallet on the nightstand, watch next to his bed. Fridge stocked, no unusual emails, no travel bookings, no financial transactions. His journal, usually carried with him, was missing. As days passed, media outlets caught wind of the mystery. Man disappears in Central Park. Teacher vanishes without a trace. The headlines grew bolder, more speculative. Claire was interviewed repeatedly. He was stable, she said. Content, methodical. He had no reason to run. But suspicion doesn't pause for grief. Some asked whether he might have staged his own disappearance. Had he left willingly? Was there a secret life? Detective Caldwell followed every possible thread. None held. No plane tickets, no aliases, no unexplained bank withdrawals. Just silence. The NYPD even entertained the possibility of suicide, though no evidence supported it. No body, no note, no known depression, no recent trauma. Claire insisted. He didn't believe in giving up. If anything, he was always trying to make sense of things, solve them. After 6 weeks, the investigation lost momentum. Tips dried up, leads turned to dust. Caldwell moved to another case. The city moved on. But Claire didn't. She kept Daniel's name in the public eye, created a website, hired a private investigator when she could afford it, walked the park daily. On anniversaries, she sat at the same bench hoping for a sign. Years passed. And yet, the strangeness of that day never dulled. The randomness of it, the clean break from the world. No chaos, no noise, no goodbye, just gone. There's a kind of silence that screams, and Central Park held that silence like a wound. By late 2009, Daniel Mercer's disappearance had become a footnote in the city's long catalogue of unsolved cases. But online, his story refused to die. Threads on message boards popped up under titles like "The Central Park Vanishing" and "Teacher Who Walked Into Nowhere." Reddit forums lit up with speculation. Some users dug through public records. Others analyzed maps of Central Park, tracing paths, measuring distances, comparing satellite images from that day. A few insisted the official story didn't add up. It wasn't just conspiracy theorists. Amateur sleuths, retired detectives, even curious college students started weighing in. They highlighted an odd detail: the absence of any physical evidence. No dropped keys, no signs of struggle, no items found during the sweep. "It's like he evaporated," one user wrote, "or walked into a part of the park that doesn't exist anymore." Soon, wilder theories surfaced. Some claimed Daniel had discovered something he wasn't supposed to, some secret buried beneath the park's surface. Others said he'd stepped through a tear in time, a phenomenon they connected to magnetic anomalies rumored to exist beneath Manhattan. A few suggested abduction, not by humans, but by something else entirely. Aliens, interdimensional beings. Theories grew bolder by the month. Claire ignored most of them at first. She focused on tangible leads. But as the years stretched and the silence remained, she began paying closer attention. Not because she believed everything, but because, in the absence of facts, even the impossible started to feel plausible. In 2011, an anonymous user posted a long thread titled "The Hidden Layers of Central Park." It began with the claim that the park's original design concealed ancient features, not just natural landscapes, but architectural elements repurposed from older structures. The user alleged that beneath the park existed a forgotten system of tunnels and chambers, predating even the park's 1857 construction. The post linked to blueprints of the original Greenswood Plan by Olmsted and Vaux, comparing it to a series of municipal maintenance documents from the 1930s. A few markings didn't match. Some tunnels were listed in one set of records and absent in others. Others ended abruptly or connected to no clear structure. The user posed a question. What if Central Park wasn't just built to offer green space but to cover something? The theory struck Claire in a place she didn't expect: memory. Daniel had once told her, half-joking, that Central Park felt like a city that's forgotten it's another city underneath. He'd shown her old maps, tried to explain how the layers of New York's past were still visible, if you knew where to look. Digging through Daniel's belongings, Claire found one of his older journals. Inside were pages marked with cryptic notations, sketches of Central Park, overlaid with hand-drawn paths and coordinates. One passage stood out: "Reservoir Edge, Elm Bench, 4 paces east. Something feels wrong with the air." It was dated March 2009. Claire shared the findings with the private investigator she'd hired. He was skeptical, but agreed to search city archives. In one old zoning report, buried in an appendix, they found a mention of a subsidiary utility passage beneath the area near the 72nd Street entrance. The description was vague. No entry point listed, no construction dates, just a line item marked "Sealed 1956, Structural Instability." The investigator filed a Freedom of Information Act request. It was denied. Meanwhile, another theory gained traction online: that Daniel had discovered a government secret hidden beneath Central Park. Some users pointed to a Cold War-era rumor that the city had installed covert monitoring stations beneath public landmarks. Others believed the tunnels had been used for psychological experiments, or worse. Claire didn't know what to believe. But one thing became increasingly clear: Daniel hadn't simply wandered off. His disappearance might not have been random, and somewhere in the convergence of history, architecture, and myth, he had found something that pulled him out of the world. What disturbed her most wasn't the lack of answers, but the growing suspicion that someone knew more than they were saying. Someone perhaps had been watching him, and if Daniel had gotten too close to something he wasn't supposed to see, maybe that was why he never came back. Claire Mercer's life gradually narrowed to a single purpose: finding out what happened to her brother. The years slipped by in patterns of frustration and repetition. The world moved on, but she didn't. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, but every date, every season seemed to circle back to April 14th, 2009. She kept a private room in her apartment dedicated entirely to Daniel's case. Walls were covered in printouts, maps, articles, and highlighted documents. A red string web stretched between landmarks, names, theories. Her friends called it obsession. Claire called it love. Her job as a freelance editor allowed flexibility. She took fewer clients, lived modestly, spent most of her time tracking patterns in the park's design and researching urban legends. She subscribed to obscure historical journals, read volumes of city planning archives, corresponded with local historians. Many dismissed her. A few were curious. One, a retired city surveyor named Walter Hume, agreed to meet. They talked for hours in a dim diner near the park's west edge. Walter remembered rumors from the 1970s, stories passed among city workers about blocked-off shafts, sealed maintenance doors, and certain dead zones under the park where equipment always malfunctioned. Back then, we just said it was bad wiring, he told her. But sometimes it felt like the place didn't want you going any deeper. Claire asked if any of those entrances still existed. He gave her 3 locations, all supposedly closed off. If your brother went looking, Walter said, he could have stumbled on something real, or something someone wanted kept buried. The idea that Daniel might have followed a literal path into the unknown haunted her. She revisited his journals again and again. One entry she had overlooked before now stood out, a quote scribbled in the margin beside a map of the park. It read, "Where nothing ends, something begins." Beneath it, he had written coordinates. Claire took those numbers to the park. They led her to an inconspicuous service gate, rusted and locked, near a thicket of overgrowth beside a maintenance road. City records listed it as decommissioned. But what unnerved her was that it had no official designation, no number, no signage, just a black metal door half swallowed by ivy. She knocked. Nothing. Pressed her ear. Silence. But for the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't name. Not fear exactly, not hope. A kind of recognition, as if her brother had once stood there too. She began documenting her findings in a personal blog, part journal, part investigation archive. It gained a small but loyal following. Readers sent her tips, strange anecdotes, and photographs. One man emailed her a blurry photo taken in 2014 from a drone above Central Park. At first glance, it was unremarkable, but zoomed in, the shadow of a structure appeared that didn't match any listed building, just a shape between trees near the service gate. The area was fenced off by then. Claire contacted the Parks Department. Her requests were denied. No such structure existed, they said. Probably a trick of the light. Still, she saved the photo. Every piece mattered. In 2019, a man named Anthony Vega reached out through her blog. He claimed he'd seen Daniel in the park, alive. Claire's heart leapt and sank at once. Vega, mid-40s, quiet and sincere, had no connection to Daniel. He said he was walking near the Ramble in late fall of 2009 when he noticed a man standing near the rocks, staring into the woods. The man looked dazed, pale, and confused. He wore a navy jacket and a baseball cap. Vega said he approached, but the man stepped back, shook his head, and disappeared down a slope. At the time, he thought it odd, but assumed it was a lost tourist. It wasn't until years later, when he stumbled on Claire's blog, that he saw Daniel's photo and felt a chill. Claire wanted to believe him. She really did. But she had been fooled before. Still, Vega's story fit certain things. The location, the time frame, the behavior. It didn't prove anything, but it reminded her of something important. The possibility Daniel had never left the park at all. And if he had stayed, somehow, what had kept him there? March 24, 2024. It was early, just after dawn, when maintenance worker Luis Carranza began his usual route cleaning benches near the 72nd Street entrance of Central Park. The morning was still wrapped in fog, and most of the park was empty. As Luis moved down a familiar path, sweeping fallen leaves and trash, he reached a bench half hidden by overgrown branches, one he always saved for last. He noticed something wedged between the slats of the wooden seat and the metal frame. At first, he thought it was just another lost item. A child's toy, a scarf, maybe a crushed drink can. But as he pulled it free, he stopped cold. It was a navy blue baseball cap, worn but intact, with the unmistakable faded logo of the New York Yankees stitched on the front. A chill ran through him, though he couldn't say why. The cap felt oddly out of place, too old, too preserved. He placed it in his cart and finished his route. Later that day, the cap made its way to the park's Lost and Found. A new intern was cataloging items when she noticed something peculiar. The label inside the cap had initials DM, faint but still visible. Out of curiosity, she searched the name. Within seconds, the missing persons case of Daniel Mercer appeared on her screen. She flagged her supervisor, who contacted the NYPD. Within 24 hours, Claire was holding the cap in her hands. She recognized it instantly. She had bought it for Daniel on his 25th birthday, a small gift after a difficult year. He had worn it almost every day since. The fraying on the brim, the slight tear near the back, those weren't signs of age, but of familiarity. This was no replica. It was his. The NYPD ran DNA testing on the inner lining. Skin cells embedded in the fabric returned a match. Daniel Mercer, 99.8% certainty. 15 years after his disappearance, his cap had reappeared on the very bench where he was last seen. News broke quickly. Lost item, maybe break in 15-year mystery. Daniel Mercer's cap found in Central Park. Theories reignited like wildfire. People asked, where had the cap been all this time? Why had no one found it during the dozens of searches, the sweeps, the daily cleanings over the years? The bench had been cleaned countless times, repainted, power washed, but no worker had ever reported a cap wedged in its frame. Until now. Claire stared at it for hours. The fabric was dusty but dry, untouched by rain or snow. There was no sign of water damage, no smell of mold, no discoloration from years of exposure. If someone had hidden it, they'd done so in a perfectly preserved vacuum. If it had just been lost there, then where had it been all this time? She returned to the park the following morning, heart pounding. She sat on the bench, listened to the wind, tried to sense something, anything. But all she heard was the chirp of birds, the rustle of early joggers, the faint sound of distant traffic. Life moved on around her. But the bench felt different, as though something had shifted, not visibly, not physically, but in some deeper current. She walked around the area, retracing Daniel's old path. Every step she took was a shadow of one he might have taken 15 years ago. But now there was something new in the air, a weight she couldn't define. Something had changed. The cap's reappearance wasn't just eerie, it was impossible. Unless, of course, it had never left. Perhaps it had been waiting. Or perhaps, as one Reddit user suggested later that day, it had just returned. Claire didn't know what that meant. But deep inside, she no longer believed this was about misplacement or oversight. No one just drops a cap after 15 years, precisely where it began. She had come to believe, over the long stretch of grief and doubt, that Daniel had found something in the park. Something hidden, something layered beneath the ordinary. And now, after years of silence, the park had spoken back. Not with words, but with the one item Daniel never left home without. The discovery of Daniel Mercer's cap ignited a firestorm of speculation. Within hours of the news breaking, hashtags like Central Park Mystery and Mercer Returns began trending. Journalists descended on the park. TV crews camped outside entrances. Internet forums lit up with new theories, old suspicions, and chilling ideas. Claire watched it all unfold from her small apartment, numb and electrified at once. The cap had changed everything. Suddenly people were listening again. Reporters who once brushed her off now requested interviews. Commenters flooded her blog. She received hundreds of emails from curious strangers, amateur sleuths, even psychics claiming visions. Most she ignored, but one email stood out. The subject line read, "He saw what he wasn't meant to." No sender name, just the message. "He found the edge. Some paths don't loop back. You still have time. Don't sit too long on that bench." That was it. Claire's hands trembled as she read the words again. The phrasing, it wasn't random. The edge. Paths that don't loop back. They echoed ideas Daniel had written in his journal years ago. Phrases he used when trying to describe distortions in geography, places where reality felt thinner. She checked the email headers. Nothing traceable. A throwaway account routed through multiple servers. She forwarded it to Detective Caldwell, who had since retired but kept casual contact with Claire. Caldwell replied 2 hours later, "Creepy but not necessarily meaningful. Could be a hoax." Be careful. Claire didn't need the warning. She had learned long ago that not everyone wanted the truth, but the cap's appearance had stirred more than the public's curiosity. Within 3 days, the NYPD officially reopened Daniel's case. They cited the cap and new public interest. Claire was invited to meet with a new detective, Jonah Avery, assigned to the review. Young, observant, and methodical, Avery brought fresh energy. He listened closely, took notes without interrupting, and, crucially, didn't mock her when she brought up the theories, the tunnels, the historical inconsistencies, the online leads. "I've seen stranger things buried under New York," Avery said. "This city's built on secrets." He promised to dig into any new municipal records, including areas of the park Claire had long been denied access to. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, the internet obsession deepened. One YouTube creator posted a 20-minute breakdown of Daniel's final day using 3D mapping software, suggesting that the area around the bench had been subtly altered since 2009. He argued that the path now curved more sharply, the trees had shifted unnaturally, and the bench's placement didn't match older satellite imagery. Another video claimed electromagnetic interference was strongest near the location, based on amateur device readings. One user uploaded a slow-motion video showing birds avoiding the area entirely. "Like something's off," the caption read. "Like the space isn't right." Theories ranged from the bizarre to the terrifying. Some believed Daniel had been abducted by a clandestine government program. Others were convinced he had stumbled into a fold in space-time, an accidental traveler caught between layers of reality. But it wasn't just online speculation anymore. With the case reopened, the media pushed harder. Questions were raised about the original investigation. Why hadn't the bench been dismantled during the 2009 search? Why had the area been cleared of surveillance footage so quickly? Why were city maintenance logs from that week missing? Claire pressed Avery on these issues. He promised to look into them. 2 days later, he called her. "I found something odd," he said. "In the original property records, that specific bench doesn't show up until 2010. Claire froze. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He was sitting on it in 2009. "I know," Avery replied. "But the Parks Department didn't officially register it until the following year. Before that, there's no permit, no purchase record. According to the city, that bench didn't exist when Daniel disappeared." The implications were staggering. Claire didn't sleep that night. Something was wrong, not just with the case, but with the place itself. If the records were true, it meant the bench, the very object tied to the cap, had somehow arrived after the event it was linked to. Unless it had always been there, and the records had changed. And if records could change, what else could? Detective Jonah Avery didn't waste time. With the anomaly surrounding the bench's city records weighing heavily on his mind, he turned his attention to Daniel's final known movements. He requested access to archived security footage from buildings bordering the southern edge of Central Park, places that might have recorded peripheral angles of the park on April 14, 2009. Most footage had been erased long ago, but one source had survived. A low-resolution camera mounted above the Natural History Museum, which overlooked a narrow strip of park. The footage was grainy, the angle distant. Still, Avery froze the frame at 9:52 a.m. A figure sat on the bench beneath the elm alone. Another frame at 10:01 showed him standing. Avery leaned in. The man was Daniel. The jacket, the stance, the tilt of the head, it was him. Then something unusual happened. At 10:03 a.m. the figure turned, not toward a path, but toward the edge of the woods. Avery zoomed as much as possible. Daniel was walking away from the bench, deeper into the park, not toward any known route. But then, just before he passed out of frame, Daniel stopped. He stared ahead for a long moment. Avery paused the footage. Behind Daniel stood a structure, almost entirely obscured by branches and shadow. It looked like an old wall, partially collapsed, covered in ivy. Avery marked the location and ran it against park blueprints. There was no structure listed there, no wall, no foundation, nothing but open space and trees. He called Claire. They met the next morning early, while the park was still quiet. Avery brought copies of the screenshots and a printed park map. Claire looked at the image. Her heart pounded. "That's near the old Ramble Trail," she said. "Daniel used to say it was the most overlooked part of the park." They walked to the coordinates. Trees loomed overhead. Birds chirped faintly. But when they reached the spot, nothing, no wall, no ruins, just damp soil, moss-covered stones and undergrowth. Claire stared, frustrated. "It's like it vanished." Avery crouched, brushing leaves aside. Something sharp scraped his glove. He cleared the ground further. Beneath a layer of dirt, he uncovered a narrow patch of brick, ancient and brittle, as if part of something larger. It looked like the edge of a path or a buried floor. He photographed it. Then, more carefully, they searched the area, eyes scanning for anything out of place. After nearly an hour, Claire noticed a strange slope behind a thicket, half concealed by vines. It was too even to be natural. Pushing through, they found it. A shallow depression in the earth that formed a perfect semicircle, rimmed by cracked stones and faint markings. Avery leaned closer. There were symbols etched into the rock, barely visible, eroded by time. Circles interlaced with arrows. Claire pulled out one of Daniel's old journal pages. The drawing matched. He'd seen this place before. "Why would he come here?" Avery asked quietly. Claire's voice caught. "Because he thought it wasn't just a park. He believed there were layers underneath. Something older. He used to say Central Park wasn't just designed. It was meant to conceal." They searched the perimeter. Then Avery spotted it, tucked into the side of a shallow hill, hidden behind brush and crumbling stone. A rusted metal grate set into the ground. It looked like a drain at first, but when he touched it, it didn't budge. Claire peered closer. "That's not a drain, it's a door." They couldn't open it. The hinges were fused with age and corrosion. But the discovery was real, tangible. Avery marked the coordinates, took more photos and flagged it for investigation. Later that day, he filed a formal request to the Parks Department to access old tunnel schematics. They responded promptly, denying any known passage in that sector. When he pressed further, the email trail abruptly ended. Claire wasn't surprised. Back at her apartment, she reopened Daniel's final journal, the one that had remained sealed in her drawer for over a decade. She flipped to the last page. The words were simple. "I think I found it." And now, so had they. But the question echoed louder than ever. What exactly had Daniel found beneath Central Park? Detective Jonah Avery knew bureaucracy could be a wall, but he hadn't expected it to be this dense. Every request he filed regarding historical structures beneath Central Park was met with deflection or silence. Officially, the Parks Department denied the existence of any subterranean architecture outside of standard utility tunnels. But the more denials he received, the more determined he became. He turned to the city's archives, not the public-facing databases, but the raw, dust-coated records buried in the Department of Buildings' off-site repository in Brooklyn, the kind of place where forgotten blueprints and yellowing maps gathered more decay than attention. After 2 days combing through mislabeled boxes, Avery found something. The document was brittle, folded into quarters, marked NYPD Internal 1954. It referenced a now-defunct task force called the Urban Infrastructure Survey Team, created during Cold War panic. Their mission: identify vulnerabilities in New York's public works that might be exploited by foreign agents. The section on Central Park was brief, but chilling. Beneath the northwest quadrant of the park, survey team encountered undocumented stonework, resembling pre-1900 construction. Passageways sealed after incident involving 2 inspectors experiencing extreme disorientation and hallucinations. Area permanently restricted under Municipal Safety Clause 8.4. Avery stared at the page. No coordinates, no photos, just a note. Further inquiry suspended. Side report, Echo 7. Echo 7 wasn't in the box. It wasn't in any catalogue. It was gone. He called Claire. They met again, this time in his office. When she read the excerpt, her hands clenched around the paper. He talked about hallucinations. In his older journals, he described moments where he said the park felt off, like it was shifting beneath him. Avery pulled out a city grid map from 1899. It was more detailed than most modern versions and included outdated sewer lines and infrastructure not maintained anymore. On it, just above the ramble, a small symbol appeared, a hexagonal node with the word Hatch 3. Modern maps had no such marking. "Do you think it's one of the entrances?" Claire asked. "Possibly," Avery said. "It lines up with where we found that rusted grate." But there was more. Avery had been reviewing Daniel's academic publications. One article, published in a niche history journal in 2007, was titled "The Lost Foundations of Central Manhattan." It discussed architectural overlays, how older structures were demolished, but some foundations remained, absorbed by later construction. Buried in the footnotes, Daniel mentioned an oral account from a 19th century groundskeeper who claimed the land now known as Central Park had once hosted a temple of stone used by an unnamed group that vanished before records began. Daniel had written, "Unverifiable, but fascinating. If true, such structures may remain in the lower layers, unseen by modern eyes." Claire had read that article before. She had dismissed the temple story as academic flavoring. Now she wasn't so sure. If Daniel had traced these stories seriously, perhaps that was what led him to the sealed door in 2009. Maybe he hadn't been chasing myth. Maybe he was following footprints long erased. Avery began cross-referencing Daniel's journals with excavation permits issued over the past century. One name appeared repeatedly, the Meacham Foundation. Publicly listed as a preservation non-profit, it had funded multiple landscaping projects in Central Park since 1948, all concentrated around zones with unusual topography. The foundation's filings were pristine, too pristine. No overlap, no disputes, no delays. Avery couldn't find a single case of permit denial. When he tried calling their listed number, he got a generic voicemail. The next day, he drove to the address listed for their headquarters in Midtown. It was a parking garage. Claire wasn't surprised. "If this foundation is fake," she said, "maybe it was created to quietly cover up whatever's under there." The pattern was growing. Denied records, missing reports, blueprints that didn't match reality, a non-profit that didn't exist, a door that shouldn't be there, and a cap returned 15 years late with no explanation. Something was being hidden, not only physically beneath the park, but also from the historical record itself, manipulated, reshaped, cleaned of inconsistencies. But Daniel had left clues, and one by one they were surfacing. Now there was only one direction left to go, down. Claire and Avery returned to the rusted grate beneath the ramble just after 4 a.m., the park draped in shadow, hushed and breathless. Avery had brought tools, a crowbar, flashlight, gloves. He'd filed no request, submitted no paperwork. There were no cameras. If they were wrong, no one would know. If they were right, someone might never let them try again. The metal resisted at first, shrieking as Avery wedged the bar beneath it. Claire stood back, scanning the trees. When it finally gave way, the smell hit them. Damp earth, rust, and something older, like time trapped in stone. A narrow shaft opened into darkness, leading to a metal ladder descending into silence. Avery looked at Claire. "You don't have to come. I've waited 15 years for this," she said. "I'm not staying up here." The descent was slow. Each rung groaned beneath their weight. 10 feet, 20, 30. Then suddenly they hit concrete. Claire's flashlight flickered across walls made of blackened stone, slick with moisture. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a room. Roughly circular, maybe 20 feet wide, with walls curving in ways that seemed subtly wrong. Not smooth curves, but slight tilts, like the space resisted symmetry. The floor was uneven, sloping subtly toward the center, where a circular grate covered a deep shaft. There were no markings, no doors, only one feature, a narrow niche carved into the wall where a weathered reel-to-reel tape recorder sat, draped in cobwebs. Avery stepped forward, cleared it gently. It was connected to a rusted box embedded in the wall. Against reason, he pressed a switch. A low click echoed, followed by a soft hum. Then the reel spun. A voice emerged, worn, slow, but clear. "This is Daniel Mercer. If anyone finds this, I need you to listen carefully." Claire staggered back, her knees weakening. She gripped Avery's arm. The voice continued, shaky but lucid. "I came here following patterns, symbols, old city plans. I didn't believe the stories, not really. I thought I was tracking history, but this isn't history. It's something else. This place, it moves." The reel hissed for a moment, then resumed. I lost track of time. The tunnel didn't end. I kept walking. The walls changed. They shifted. I started seeing lights, reflections that didn't belong. The air. It bends here. I heard voices that weren't mine, and I'm not alone. Another pause. Static. They watch. Not with eyes, but presence. I don't know what they are. I don't think they want to hurt me, but I don't think they care either. This isn't a place for us. It's a fold, I think. A mistake. Or maybe a door. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. The recording felt both ancient and immediate. Daniel's voice, preserved in metal and magnetic tape, felt alive. "They showed me things," he said. "I don't know if they were memories or possibilities. Whole lives I didn't live. Futures that never happened. I think I understand now. This isn't about being lost, it's about being unwritten." A final pause. "If you're here, don't stay long. The longer you stay, the less you remember. That's why I recorded this. It's the only thing that holds." A low click followed. The reel stopped spinning. Silence returned. Avery turned to Claire, stunned. "He was down here. He left this." Claire touched the recorder, reverent. He knew someone would come. They looked around again, scanning the walls. Avery spotted faint grooves behind the niche, shaped like a doorframe. It didn't open, but the message was clear. Daniel had found a way deeper. "We can't keep this quiet," Avery said. "People need to know." Claire nodded, but her mind raced. If Daniel had left this recording, it meant he was alive, for some time at least. But where was he now? And what had he meant by unwritten? There were no answers here, only echoes. But they had found something undeniable. Daniel Mercer hadn't vanished. He had descended. And whatever he'd discovered beneath Central Park wasn't myth. It was real. And it was still down there, waiting. They returned the next night, armed with better lights, masks, gloves, and a portable recorder of their own. Neither spoke much during the descent. The darkness below now carried a different weight, not just mystery, but memory. Daniel's voice still echoed in their minds. The circular room was unchanged. The tape had finished. Claire stood for a long time in front of it, uncertain whether to touch it again. Avery began to examine the stone grooves behind the niche more closely. With gentle pressure, he felt a click. The wall trembled slightly, dust falling in thin streams. A panel shifted inward by inches, revealing a narrow corridor swallowed by blackness. They exchanged a glance, then, slowly, stepped through. The corridor sloped downward and the temperature dropped. The walls were a strange mix of stone and something smoother, concrete maybe, or something else entirely. It didn't feel constructed. It felt formed. The air grew thick, not stale but charged, like a storm waiting to break. Claire's flashlight flickered, even with fresh batteries. The hallway twisted, looping gently but never sharply. It gave no sense of direction, no clear path back. They marked their way with chalk, though Claire had the sense that marks here might fade faster than they should. Then ahead, a hum. They paused, listening. Not machines, not electricity. It was subtle, like the vibration of sound through liquid, a resonance more felt than heard. The flashlight caught something on the wall. Symbols. Not language, not letters, just impressions, circles, lines, intersecting arcs. They weren't painted, they pulsed. At the end of the corridor they found a second chamber, larger, oval. The ceiling arched high above them, though it dissolved into shadow. In the center stood a plinth, black, glossy, with a surface like still water. And beside it, an object. Claire stepped forward and recognized it instantly. Daniel's journal. She lunged for it before Avery could stop her. It was real, aged, cracked leather, the corner worn just as she remembered. She opened it. Inside, the pages were filled, but not in Daniel's handwriting. They were covered in looping scripts she didn't recognize. Some entries looked like diagrams. Others resembled poetry, if poetry had no language. But on the final page, one sentence had been written in familiar ink. "I am not sure how long I've been here." Her heart sank, but then the voice returned, not from the tape, not from memory, but from a speaker embedded in the ceiling. Daniel's voice. Real time. "Claire." She dropped the journal. Avery froze. "I hoped it would be you." Claire turned in slow disbelief. "Daniel? I don't know how long it's been. Time doesn't move the same here. It folds, it loops. Sometimes I think I'm still walking." Her voice broke. "Where are you?" "I'm here," he said. "But not fully. I crossed through something, a threshold. Once I passed it, the path closed." Claire tried to speak, but no words came. "I've seen versions of you, flickers, moments where I thought I was back, but I wasn't. This place, it's layered, dimensions brushing against each other. I think it's a node." Avery leaned in. "Can we open it? Bring you out?" A long pause. "Maybe, but not without cost. The more you stay, the less real the surface becomes. This place forgets who you are, rewrites you. That's why I recorded the message. That's why I left the cap. It was the only thing I could push back through." Claire was trembling. "You're alive." "Part of me," Daniel said. "Enough to remember, enough to warn you. Then come back." "I want to," he whispered. "But if I open the door, something else may come through." The silence afterward was unbearable. Then Daniel spoke once more. "There is a room beyond this one, a mirror room. I left another recording there. It explains everything, what I saw, what I chose, what this place really is." The speaker cut out. Claire rushed to the edge of the chamber. A narrow staircase spiraled downward, barely visible. Avery followed without a word. At the bottom they found a circular vault, its walls covered in mirrored panels. In the center, a recorder, red light blinking, waiting to be played. They looked at each other, then pressed play. The recording clicked on. At first, silence. Then Daniel's voice, slower this time, more deliberate, like someone choosing every word with care, aware they might be their last. "I don't know how long I've had to think," he began. "Maybe days, maybe years. But what I've seen down here, it's not meant for us. Not in the way we understand space or time or even memory." Claire and Avery stood motionless, the mirrored walls reflecting them infinitely. The recorder pulsed red, casting a faint glow across the room. "There are rooms here that show you things, versions of your life, moments you forgot or never lived. Some feel like dreams. Others feel more real than waking. I walked through one where I was a father, another where Claire was the one who disappeared. In one version, I never entered the park. In another, I never existed at all." A breath. "These mirrors, they aren't reflections. They're doors. Each one leads to a slight deviation. And the more you pass through, the more you forget the original path. I barely remember my own name some days. I only remember her, my sister, her voice, her laugh, the only anchor I have." Claire's eyes burned with tears. "I came down here chasing knowledge, history. But what I found was a fracture in the foundation of the world, a seam, a flaw, something ancient and patient and indifferent. This place doesn't care who you are. It feeds on possibility." A pause. A rustling sound as if the recorder was being moved. "I don't think it was built. I think it was uncovered, and the people who found it buried it again, hoping no one else would. But New York, it shifts, it breathes, and sometimes it reveals what it was never supposed to." Static crackled, then calmed. "I've seen them, the Watchers, not beings exactly, more like outlines, shapes in the walls. They never speak, they observe. I think they exist across all versions. I don't know if they created this place or if they're trapped here too." Another pause. His voice grew quieter. "There's a way back. I've seen it. A corridor that only opens when the mirrors align a certain way. It's not always there. But when it appears, you have to choose. Leave with what you remember, or stay and forget. Claire clutched the journal to her chest. Avery took a step closer to the recorder, as if proximity might clarify meaning. I tried to leave once, Daniel said, but I turned back. I wasn't ready. I thought I could learn more. I thought I had time. His voice wavered. I don't anymore. A soft chime sounded from the tape like glass resonating. If you've come this far, then you've felt it too, the shift. The park above doesn't sit still, it moves, aligns, waits. And if you're standing in the right place at the right moment, it lets you in. He paused. And sometimes it lets you out. The recording clicked again, then stopped. Total silence. Claire stood frozen, replaying every word in her mind. She had feared he was gone, lost, erased. But now she understood. Daniel hadn't disappeared. He had stayed. Avery whispered, "He said the way out only opens when the mirrors align." Claire scanned the room. The mirrored panels reflected at slightly different angles. No handles, no hinges. But in the center, beneath the recorder, a faint circle was etched into the floor. She stepped onto it. The mirrors flickered. The reflection across from her wavered, then changed. Not her, but a different version. One where she was older, smiling. Daniel stood beside her, whole and alive. Then it vanished. Another mirror shimmered, a hallway, stone, identical to the one they'd entered from. But this time a soft wind blew through it. Avery's voice was tight. "That's it. It's opening." Claire turned to him. "We go now. We take what we found, and we don't come back." Together they stepped toward the mirror. The hum intensified, light warped. For a moment Claire felt everything shift, her weight, her memories, her own name. Then, like slipping through water, they emerged, back in the circular room. The recorder was gone. The niche was sealed. Only the journal remained in Claire's hands. They climbed the ladder. And when they reached the surface, morning had already broken. By the time Claire and Avery emerged from the hidden shaft, the sun had risen. The park was alive again. Runners, tourists, birdsong, laughter. It felt unreal. The world moved forward as if nothing had happened, as if beneath their feet the impossible hadn't just unfolded. They said nothing for a while. Both were trying to hold on to the clarity they had inside, that strange sense of knowing, of memory, of truth. But already it was fading. Avery drove Claire home. They didn't speak until he parked outside her building. "We need to go public," he said. "We have evidence, coordinates, Daniel's voice." Claire nodded slowly. "We will." But not yet. She spent the next day transcribing everything from Daniel's journal, preserving his words before the pages could fade or disappear. The text remained stable. She posted selections on her blog, just enough to stir interest, not enough to trigger alarm. But within 48 hours, things began to change. First, the email, a cease and desist order from a law firm she'd never heard of, citing unauthorized disclosure of municipal security infrastructure. The letter was unsigned. The address didn't trace to any active firm. Then Avery was called into a closed-door meeting with the NYPD Internal Affairs Unit. When he returned, he looked different, tight-jawed, withdrawn. "They're shutting it down," he said. "Everything. The case is being reclassified. I've been reassigned." Claire felt the old anger rise. "Did you tell them?" "I didn't need to," he said. "Someone already knew. They said my inquiry had compromised city security. They even implied I'd falsified the footage." He handed her a flash drive. "I backed up everything. They'll wipe my system by morning." That night, Claire received a phone call from a number with no caller ID. A calm male voice spoke without introduction. "Stop digging. You found enough. Walk away now, and this ends here." She hung up without answering. The next day, the grate in Central Park was gone, literally, replaced by new concrete with fresh grass seeded above it. No trace remained. The bench where Daniel's cap had appeared was also removed, under renovation, said a small laminated sign. Claire's blog was taken offline, citing violations of platform policy. Her appeal was denied. Even her emails began bouncing. Digital accounts she'd used for years simply vanished. She met Avery in secret a week later. He looked like he hadn't slept. "They're burying it," he said. "All of it, like it never happened." Claire showed him the journal, still intact. "They can't erase this." He gave a dry smile. "They'll try." But Claire wasn't ready to let go. She began printing physical copies of Daniel's words, left them in coffee shops, slipped them into library books, mailed excerpts to universities, journalists, anyone she could think of. Some people responded. Most didn't. Then one morning, a manila envelope appeared under her door. No return address. Inside was a photo, black and white, dated June 1955. It showed a group of men in trench coats standing beside the same circular room she and Avery had found underground. The recorder was in the center. One of the men was looking directly into the camera. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faded ink, "We couldn't contain it, only delay." There was no signature. Claire knew then. This had happened before. Daniel wasn't the first. He might not even be the last. And someone had always been watching. That night, she opened her laptop and began writing a full account, every detail from Daniel's early journals to their descent into the mirror chamber. She titled it, "The Park Beneath the Park." Before she could publish it, her internet cut out, then her lights. She looked out the window. A black SUV idled across the street, and in that moment, she understood something chilling. This was never just about Daniel. It was about a place that should not exist, and the lengths to which some would go to keep it hidden. Claire Mercer disappeared on a Tuesday. The forecast had called for rain, but the sky remained clear. She left no note, no email, no call. Her apartment door was locked from the inside. Dishes were in the sink. The coffee machine had been used that morning. Her bag, laptop, and keys were gone, but her phone was still on the kitchen table, screen cracked down the middle. No signs of struggle. No forced entry, just gone. A neighbor reported seeing her earlier that morning stepping into a cab. Another claimed they saw her walking toward the park alone. Neither account was confirmed. The security cameras in her building had been offline due to scheduled maintenance. Avery received a call from an unlisted number shortly after noon. A female voice, flat and unfamiliar, said, "She made her choice, let it end." He dropped the phone. That evening, her car was found, parked neatly outside Central Park's west entrance. Doors locked, engine cold. Inside, nothing but a worn notebook left on the passenger seat. The final page had been torn out, but something else was found, folded on the bench near the reservoir. Her scarf. The same one she wore the night she and Avery had descended. It was clean, untouched by rain or wind, as if placed there, gently. News of her disappearance broke quickly. Most articles referenced her brother's case, reviving old headlines with new tension. Another Mercer vanishes. Central Park mystery deepens. Sister who searched too long. Gone. But there were no vigils this time. No public statements from the NYPD, no press conference, only silence. Avery tried to fight back. He leaked files to journalists, posted evidence anonymously, photos, transcripts, Daniel's voice. But every upload vanished within hours. Email servers purged, cloud storage corrupted. Even printed files mailed through the post never arrived. Eventually, he realized something terrifying. It wasn't just being hidden, it was being erased. Every trace of Claire's involvement began disappearing. Her blog archives collapsed. Search engines returned nothing. Even cached versions blinked out one by one. Her apartment was emptied within a week. New tenants moved in before the month ended. He confronted his superiors, demanded answers. They looked through him like he didn't exist. He started noticing things, shadows where there should be light, people watching him at stoplights, whispers in elevators. Then one day, his own badge stopped working. His credentials were marked as inactive, access denied. He was no longer a detective, but he still had the flash drive, the recordings, the journal scans, Daniel's voice. And one more thing, an audio message Claire had left him the night before she vanished. She had whispered, "If you're hearing this, I've made my decision. I can't let Daniel be alone. I know the door. I know when it opens. Don't follow me. Don't try to find me. Tell the world if you must, but know this, it doesn't want to be known." He kept the message, played it every day. Until it too vanished. From his drive, from backups, from devices that had never touched the internet. Gone. Avery moved upstate after that. Quiet town, new name. He kept a copy of Daniel's journal hidden beneath floorboards, but even in the silence, the weight never left. Some nights he woke with a start, certain he'd heard Claire's voice. Sometimes he found strange marks in his backyard, circles in the grass too perfect to be natural. Once he found an old photo tacked to his door, Daniel standing in a place that didn't exist. No note, just the image. And through all of it, the same thought haunted him. They hadn't been silenced. They had crossed, one by choice, one by need. And wherever they were, beneath the city, beyond the mirrors, they were together now. That gave him peace. But it didn't stop him from looking at the sky some nights, wondering if the door was still open, and if it ever truly closed. Years passed quietly, but Central Park never fully forgot. Rumors lingered, whispered in coffee shops and shared online as anonymous threads that quickly vanished. Teenagers dared each other to search the park at night. Urban explorers swapped coordinates, mapping strange occurrences and subtle shifts in the landscape. Some claimed to see figures walking near the ramble, figures that shimmered briefly before disappearing. Most dismissed them as stories, but stories, even whispers, keep memories alive. In 2030, a young journalist named Emily Boyd stumbled upon an old forum archive, fragments saved by someone years earlier. She read Daniel Mercer's name, traced his sister Claire's attempts to uncover the truth, and rediscovered Avery's suppressed leaks. Intrigued, she dug deeper. Emily contacted Avery, who by then was living quietly in a remote farmhouse. At first, he refused to speak. Eventually, something in her persistence softened him. He invited her to visit. They talked for hours. Avery recounted everything, the disappearances, the tunnels, the mirrors, the watchers. He showed her Daniel's journal, still hidden beneath his floorboards, its words unchanged after all these years. Emily asked if he believed Daniel and Claire were still alive. "Yes," he answered without hesitation, "but not in a way we can understand. They crossed into something different, a reality adjacent to ours." She hesitated, notebook trembling. "Do you think it'll happen again?" Avery nodded slowly. "It always does. It's waiting." Emily returned to the city determined. She gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and retraced steps forgotten or hidden. Eventually, she had enough to publish. Her article was titled, "The Forgotten Path Beneath Central Park." It went viral immediately. Authorities denied everything as expected. City officials called it fiction. Critics laughed it off as urban legend. But people listened. Soon others stepped forward. Employees who remembered unusual maintenance orders. Retired workers who'd seen blueprints that vanished. Locals who shared stories of strange lights and lost hours. The Mecham Foundation, once anonymous, issued a single vague statement before dissolving entirely. Emily didn't stop there. She began hosting tours of the park, leading groups along Daniel's path, narrating the mystery that had claimed two siblings. People flocked to listen, captivated by the reality that blurred so closely with legend. One chilly evening, after the final tour had dispersed, Emily lingered by the reservoir. The bench where Daniel and Claire's belongings had appeared was back, freshly painted, perfectly ordinary. She sat quietly, notebook in hand, thinking of what Avery had said, that the park was always waiting. Suddenly the air shifted, the noise of the city softened, the trees fell still. She felt a presence. Slowly, she turned her head. On the opposite side of the path stood two figures, hazy in the twilight, but unmistakably familiar. Daniel and Claire. They looked as they had years before, unaged, untouched by time. Claire raised her hand gently, as if greeting an old friend. Daniel smiled, calm and knowing. Emily's heart raced. "Are you real?" Daniel spoke softly, his voice resonating clearly. "We always were." "Are you trapped?" she whispered. "No," Claire answered warmly. "We chose to stay. There's a beauty here, a freedom. But we left a part of us behind so others could find their way." "What should I do?" Emily asked, suddenly aware that she stood at the edge of something immense. Daniel stepped forward. "Tell the story. Let people know it's real. But warn them. It chooses who enters. And not all who enter wish to leave." Claire reached into her pocket, producing a small object, a familiar navy blue Yankees cap. She placed it gently on the bench. "Take this," Claire said softly. "It will help others believe." Then they turned, walking hand in hand toward the trees. As they moved, their forms faded, dissolving like mist into darkness. Emily picked up the cap. Warm, familiar, unchanged. Proof. The park returned to normal. Noise resumed, the air cleared. She clutched the cap and smiled. This story would never vanish again, and neither would Daniel or Claire. If you've enjoyed unraveling this mystery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories hidden beneath the surface of our everyday world. And click the video on your screen now to continue the journey, because some stories are too incredible to forget, and they're waiting just beyond the next click.